And I'll come to you, Mr. C, for your analysis on this story, as the Inspector General of Police has sent the soldiers, police special forces, to go into the state government reserve area with the purpose of hunting for the herdsmen who allegedly killed Mrs. Funke Olakuri, the daughter of the head of or leader of the Afenifere. But your thoughts on this story? We see reactions coming from different stakeholders.
Okay. I believe on Friday, Mrs. Funke Olakuni was killed somewhere in those states,
Mm,
allegedly by herdsmen. There are
mm,
differing accounts of what happened.
mm,
And we see here that the IGP has sent his special units of special forces and regular policemen into the forest to get the killers. Now, this is good. This is ordinarily what should happen.
mm-hmm,
However, she's not the first to be attacked by these herdsmen.
mm.
There have been recurrent reports of our highways, especially now in the southwest, being very unsafe.
Especially the Benin or Expressway.
Yes, I have friends in Oshun or Oyo who are afraid to drive home
Mm,
because of the insecurity. And the Punch reports that they've turned the government reserve, Cocoa Reserve, into their base. So it calls into question what are the security agencies doing? How do they gather intelligence? And then when if they eventually get the of Mrs. Olakuri, what's next?
mm,
Why do we not have regular patrols on that stretch of the country?
mm-hmm.
And it calls into question really our security architecture. We need to review it because we seem to be very short on intelligence gathering. We always seem to be reactive
Mm.
rather than taking steps to prevent these sort of things from happening. And it then keys into the repeated clamor for the creation of state police because it appears that the government at the center, beset with too many problems, has prioritized certain problems.
And it's not able to focus on
Yes,
specific issues
yes.
and
Now,
addressing those.
if the governors were in charge of state police forces, they would then be able to face and confront specific threats.
Mm,
Because as it is right now, the commissioner of police does not report to the governor, is not bound to take instructions from the governor.
mm.
So it ties the governor's hands and makes them look incompetent.
But why then do we regard the state governors as the chief security officers of the state if they do not have oversight functions over security matters?
Because we collect a huge security vote.
That's not the only reason. But it will be assumed that the state governors would actually have this interest at heart and direct security forces in this respect, especially around areas that are within their jurisdiction.
Yeah, but you see, the challenge is this: the branches of the Navy, the Air Force, and the military in each state also do not report to the governor. So I've always wondered why the governor is described as a chief security officer, because he cannot give valid instructions to any of them. And if they elect not to take his instructions, there's absolutely nothing he can
So,
do.
what do you see going forward happening in this case? I mean, you've highlighted the fact that unfortunately this is getting this size of response or amount of response or reaction based on the profile of the individual concerned. But a lot of people are still the reality now is a lot of people are scared of traveling by road.
True.
So where to what end? Where do you see this solution coming from?
I think the first line or the first stage of a solution would come from the states setting up vigilante groups. They
That's
need
that.
that,
Okay.
that no, 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 no,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the first step. Then they need to place more pressure on their members in the National Assembly
Mm.
to force the president and the security chiefs to come up with a lasting solution to this nonsense. And part of it keys into the fact that the economy is in doldrums. When you have a lot of unemployed youth with no hope, no future, no certainty, they will resort to crime.
All right, thank you, Mr. C, for your analysis. We'll go to this next story from the Guardian newspaper. Nigeria accounts for bulk of Africa's $90 billion stashed assets. A while ago, not so long ago, we had the talks, ongoing conversation within the African countries, um, insinuating or making plans to bring one common currency for African nations. But seeing that, I mean, we even have a history of the African Trade Agreement, how long it took Nigeria to even listen to that conversation, if they've signed it or not, is still another matter.
They have signed it.
But let's look let's look at this story. Having all these ideas, all these situations in mind. But what are your thoughts regarding this story, Wadi?
Okay, the first thing is with a budget of roughly $3 billion a year, which is about 9 trillion naira. Um, the first question you need to ask yourself is how much exactly of this 90 billion belongs to Nigeria? Um, and there are quite a number of questions that come up. If I don't know what the percentages are, but you can better understand why there is poverty in the nation.
Mm.
So much poverty in the nation. What has happened to all the funds that were returned in the past? Because one of the things that you find out is even when you return these stashed monies, they seem to go back somewhere else that nobody sees. Many times the Abacha funds that have been returned, nobody knows where they went to. They will tell you they went into one thing or the other, but you can't specifically say where they went to. But it's a huge problem, not just for Nigeria but for Africa as a whole. Maybe with the new Africa trade, yeah, we might start to get better the monies away. You'd invest them in other African countries and so
Should
on
we
and so
expect the
on.
solution to come
I
from
don't
the
see how
Africa
that
Trade
would change it.
Agreement
I don't think it
or
will come.
foreign relations per se?
I don't see
Because
how. I don't see how it changes.
Um, when okay, let's look at one part. The what the acting chairman of the FCC said about self-discipline, which I agree with. However, self-discipline comes from so many things. We're not preaching self-discipline in Nigeria.
are we acting it?
We're not even preaching it, not to talk about acting it. Everybody is about me, myself, and I. And it's all about what I get and how I get it. Really doesn't care about society. When you talk about self-discipline, then you have to bring it into the societal context where everybody has to understand the fact that there's a system that should work, and that's how it should work.
I think he was referring largely to the institutions that exist because these monies do not grow wings and fly abroad. They do not even appear in the horizon in a foreign country and then are repatriated back to Nigeria. They come from here. And we found out over time when these monies are traced, it's usually sometimes coming from government agencies or personalities who've left office over a period of time, and then these monies are even discovered not just by the Nigerian government or sometimes by foreign bodies who have a part to play in recovering these sums. But looking at the establishments, the agencies, ministries in Nigeria, we find that there are certain unscrupulous elements that still exist. How going beyond preaching, how do we act out these tenets?
Well, you need to create better systems within the context of all the agencies. In Nigeria, what we do is that rather than create systems and celebrate systems, we celebrate individuals. So you say, oh, XYZ is the one who is fighting corruption. Meanwhile, XYZ can only do as much as he can because he believes his own self-discipline is high. But when you find out that the system as a whole, from the gatesman to the minister, are all corrupt, then it's very difficult for you to actually fight this.
Let me ask you a direct question, and that goes to you so you can answer. If you had a certain amount of money that would give you the wherewithal to invest or probably buy property abroad, would you rather buy the property here, or would you actually go abroad to buy this property?
Personally, I would rather buy the property here and invest in Nigeria.
Interesting, Tunde.
No, I mean,
I know I'm asking this question.
It's a bit money question. Since it's about money, it's about, well, give me the best returns. Nigeria still does offer pretty good returns if it was, in terms of, and the opportunity to grow in terms of real estate. So I probably would invest in Nigeria. It depends on what we're talking about and where abroad. Anyways, I mean, if I come in here, look, we're not the only ones. Sometimes we talk of like our situations are unique, right? We're not the only ones that have had this challenge, and there've been examples of nations that have overcome it, and it's very simple. They've taken away, well, everything is merit based. We don't have a merit-based system, and they've implemented consequences.
Yeah.
Right. Look at China. Look at Singapore. Look at anywhere that turned.
Look at Chile.
Look at any place that turned things around in a short period of time. They implemented consequences. I mean, we can one scapegoat at a time. you know, you can complain and say, oh, it's targeted at this person, targeted at that person, but it's happening, right? That's what we need to do. We don't have consequence for bad behavior, and it continues to happen. Although it has become much harder for people, for corrupt government to stash money abroad for a bunch of reasons. One being terrorism, right? There's a lot more track on funds as they move back and forth, but Africa needs to do better. It's consequences.
Thank you, Tunde. We have a message here from JP. It says, "Good morning, freshly pressed. The security agencies, in my opinion, do not need to functionally report to the governors to get the job done. The federal government is clueless in this, and that's what the National Assembly has to checkmate, and they need to do it fast." Our next story from Premium Times newspaper. Nigerian soldiers, Premium Times publication rather. Nigerian soldiers on escort duty steal billions from a VIP. That's a very important personality. And Desert Army, they said they were meant to convey these sums and load it onto a military jet that was supposed to be airlifted to Abuja. These monies were brought in by with a Toyota truck. But take us through the story, how it happened. It reads out like a movie. It's Hollywood flick.
Yes, Valentine.
But your thoughts on this?
It looks like a Hollywood movie. So, quick background. Premium Times reports that 5 Nigerian soldiers and the GOC of the 8th Army Division, Sokoto, moved money said to be billions of naira from Sokoto all the way down to Jaji, which is about 400 kilometers by road. The story goes on to say that upon getting to Jaji, the 5 soldiers, that is 2 corporals and 3 lance corporals, abandoned the vehicles, abandoned their weapons, but took the money. And Jaji, it's a military airstrip, which I believe should be guarded by soldiers or manned by soldiers. The story doesn't say how the money was moved. But more importantly, there's an airport in Sokoto. 8th Division, Sokoto, is in Sokoto. Why wasn't the money moved to Sokoto Airport and flown to Abuja?
What was this money for?
Now, there's no...
Matters unknown.
Now, the report doesn't say where the money is coming from, or where it was headed to, or what
Or
it
who
is
this
for.
VIP
Or who it belongs to.
Yeah, but if you read from the story, you can clearly infer that this transaction is not legitimate because they had to go 400 kilometers to a military airfield. And then, following this incident, which apparently is not the first, the Nigerian Army HQ in Abuja, or the 8th Division HQ in Sokoto, have been silent on this issue. And they've now declared the 5 soldiers who took money in inexplicable circumstances wanted for desertion. But the bigger question is, how does a GOC have money running into billions of naira?
That's interesting. That's interesting because it reminds you it gives you a distasteful reminder of the monies that were, earmarked for purchase of arms, and reminds you of that incident. And we see a lot of monies in our stories, being said to disappear mysteriously, either swallowed by a chimpanzee
Or a snake.
or anything. So
and oftentimes you don't get any conclusive reports about it. You just hear the reports. You don't hear anything conclusive about it.
And what is shocking about this story is that the action of the soldiers was described as a breach of trust, which shows there's no honor among them.
And also leads to a part where they said because they suspect that because they weren't taken care of financially, they weren't paid the service that they rendered to a particular VIP. Okay, so we look forward to getting the identity of this. I would have hoped that this Premium Times report will expose some personalities involved.
No, it identified the money
As
Hakeem Otiki, the GOC 8th Division of the Army, because it says Nigerian Army says so Premium Times, the victim of the robbery. Is Hakeem Otiki.
So now the question is, does it belong to him personally, or was it money for a particular function of the government or anything?
Because there is always the real victim, the man or Nigerian.
He can't be named as being the victim if it was government money. Government money. So obviously we know the ultimate source of the money is government. We know, but from whose label did it was it stolen? It's from this, and that's why these things happen. When they know that GOC has done his own, I mean, we need a share of the whole thing. Well, that's the problem. Nigeria is Stranger Things. We're living in the upside down world.
Takes us back to the thought of consequences that you shared, Tunde. But
Mhm.
thank you, Mr. C. Let's go to this next story very quickly about the Nigerian Communications Commission. They have planned to set up a cybercrime incident response team to nip the nefarious acts in the board. This nefarious act is they say is the rate of cybercrime that's perpetrated through the telecommunications network, and now brings a question to the security level of security that exists in our
We're
infrastructure.
forever planning in Nigeria. You know, cybercrime has been a major issue in the world in the last 5, 10 years,
Mm.
and we're only just planning to set up a what's it called? Good idea. However, do we have to react to everything? We've heard so many things. The U.S. elections, the elections all over the world has been breached because of this kind of things, and we're only just planning to set up a committee like we always do. And at the end of the day,
But
where are we going to get
they
to?
have made moves, Wade.
Better
In the
late than
recent
never.
past, they've made moves to to curb these activities in terms of cybercrime. In biometric registration, for instance, that was introduced years ago. Before when you purchase a SIM card, before it's registered, or before you can use the phone number, that is in exist. That has been in existence, right? Is
Valentine,
that enough?
you see, maybe. However, I go to MTN, I have biometrics. I go to Airtel, I go to different
Yes.
telecommunications organizations, I have biometrics. I go get a passport, I have biometrics, and so on and so forth. The database for these biometrics, how do you put them all together and decide that Mr. X or Mr. B, who has biometrics in telecommunications, in the banks, in everywhere, is the same person? So a lot of all these things are not properly coordinated, and that's why that's why I'm asking, why are we just planning as things have been known across the world? It's good that at least they are doing something. They tend to be doing something.
So I mean, just quickly, it's good that the NCC does focus on that, but the thing that I want to highlight is why is the NCC creating a different, body or
Body
group?
from the
Why don't they, as a regulator, make sure that the operators within the space exist? Because we have recently passed, or relatively recently passed, cybercrime bills and acts, and there are already agencies and institutions who are meant to. I mean, and some would even complain that their reach seems to be even wider than the remits of the bill. But we already have people responsible for this. I don't think NCC needs to create another agency just for telecoms. Get the operators regulator, get the operators to adhere to what the cybercrime bills tenets are.
Thank you very much, Tunde.
All right, let's go on to our next story. But a few comments before we do that. On WhatsApp, we have this from Yinkus, who talks about the differences between a functional head and an administrative head in response to the police report. He said the Commissioner of Police reports to the Governor administratively while he reports to the Inspector General of Police functionally. We just need to balance it well to make it work. So the functional head does not have to be in the same place with you. Also, we have this one from Ubo Machidozie. For starters, who is this VIP? What's the money meant for? I guess this is literally for buying arms. I beg, I can only say good luck to the soldiers. Oh, really? They should go and enjoy. That's Ubo Machidozie. All right, okay. Well, that's Ugoma's thoughts. Does not represent Smooth FM's views. But let's go on to our next story. Group demands data capture of Fulani herdsmen. Tunde, I'll come to you for this story. So, worried about the increased space of killings and kidnappings, the group is known as the Congress of Northern Nigeria Christians. Those who are seeking to at least graze in Nigeria. What do you think about this story? Please take us through.
Okay, so my view is that first of all, there should be mandatory data capturing of everyone, right? And this speaks to us not knowing how many we are, who we are, and where we are, right? We don't have the national database of all who are born. We don't have the equivalent of a national insurance number or social security number. Bottom line is the one thing or the few things that identify as a Nigerian are perhaps the sounding of. We all know how easy that is, right?
My husband was telling me of a friend or someone he knew from another country who had a Nigerian passport and a Nigerian last name. Gave it to himself.
So I mean, and that's what defines ultimately says you're Nigerian, because we just don't keep record and we don't track who we are. If we did that, it would be, because to me this is reactive and it's taken from it can be almost dangerous to differentiate between violent and non-violent Fulani. I'd like to say blame Fulani herdsmen. We've heard about the first story. So many killings, Olakno's killing. So many things and so many misdemeanors are blamed on Fulani herdsmen now.
They're herdsmen, Tunde, sorry, because we've been told, and that's what we mentioned, that we shouldn't even refer to them as
Fulani herdsmen. Herdsmen are herdsmen, and in fact, I would even say don't even call them herdsmen. If they're involved in kidnapping or robbery, then they're no longer herding cattle or whatever it is. So they're no longer herdsmen, they're criminals, and they could be from anywhere. And it's not impossible for people to just create a label. And it's almost political. It's politicized as everything is here. But that's an entirely different thing. What I would, however, because it then mentions things like it talks about how we need to change the story and talks about how we need to change the constitution. I mean, we've been on that forever. How we need to stop backdoor arrangements and prevent strangers in the country. And I agree. And for that reason, I would prioritize border control as well. Border control is of higher priority than saying we want to register every single person from one single ethnic group. I mean, come on, that's how Hitler started. I mean, we're not going to do that, but through history, we've seen Hitler said all Jews need to register. Small time, they gathered them, put them in a camp. Then they started killing them. I know we're not going to go down that route here, but there's always a problem when you single out one group for special treatment. Right. We need to know who we are as a people. Everybody should register.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You should just make the national identification scheme better.
Thank you very much. Now, see, I'll come to you this one. Lagos residents, still on security. Our news today is dominated by security issues. Lagos residents lose as, criminals referred to as 1 million boys returns. This is according to reports in New Telegraph. Please take us through this report.
Okay, so it's quite shameful that a gang that first emerged the Lagos scene sometime around 2012 is still dominating our headlines in 2019. Now, this was a gang that originally operated in the Ajegunle axis, but due to sustained police pressure, they relocated to other parts of the state and have continued to carry on their nefarious activities. And when several reports state that when they come out, they operate on challenge for hours on end. It calls into question what exactly is the police doing in Lagos. There's no intelligence gathering once again, and it appears there are no patrols because I'm unable to understand how a gang of say 100 or 200 young Nigerian males can operate unhindered for hours on end.
But isn't that the sweeping generalization of their functions as police or successes they've recorded so far? I mean, would you rather say none at all, or they have recorded some success, some level of success at least?
You see, Valentine, the way society operates is nobody remembers your successes, they remember your failures. It's your failures that stand out. So if there are repeated incidences of attacks in certain areas by the same group of people, it then calls into question what exactly is the police doing? And the policemen have shown time and time again that they're either ill-equipped to face these guys or ill-equipped to break them up.
Okay.
And then it points to a larger societal problem. Once again, the rising rate of unemployment, uncertainty, hopelessness, and despair drives a lot of these guys into crime because they believe that there's no legitimate source of living for them, so they can derive sustenance from a life of crime. And because they continue to operate unhindered, it attracts more people because they're told there's no point going to school. You go to school, there are no jobs for you. When you apply for a job, they're looking for 10 years experience. Where are you supposed to get that?
But let's look at solutions more than the problems. Now, seeing that information gathering is a major issue, then we can look at the collaborative effort of the society vis-a-vis the police.
Yes. So to solve this problem, these guys are not spirits. People within the community know them. So it's to reach out to the youth leaders, the leaders in those communities, and then start programs that will take these guys off the street.
But they're the ones that are members.
No, for the ones that are members, you can declare an amnesty period.
We've been down this road before. Is amnesty the major recourse?
No. It's a couch and stick approach. Yeah. So amnesty for those who deliberately want to embrace a life of law abiding. for those who refuse and are hell bent on a criminal lifestyle, you can then deal with
Influence
them.
them. But it's interesting how, like they said, the elephant in the room. We talked about unemployment, but we haven't talked about let them create jobs. Maybe have we given up hope that let's not even talk about that one?
For jobs to be created in any successful economy, it's the small and medium scale enterprises that drive growth. But this administration, for whatever reason, has been unable to push forward any policy that will drive this. And in Nigeria today, until you sort out power, nothing's going to start. And then credit from the banks.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Tunde, I'll come to you for the next one. Farmers want cocoa drink included in federal government feeding program. So the Cocoa Farmers Association of Nigeria has called for the inclusion of cocoa drink in the federal government homegrown school feeding program. Do you think they have a case or no?
I mean, it's easy to look at this and shrug it off or laugh at it depending on your disposition. But then again, when I said we're not the only ones who've had our problems are not unique. I mean, there's an example from Singapore as well that implemented that was, in similar situations. And obviously, probably on they're smaller countries, so smaller scale, but the principles are the same. And when they're trying to pull themselves out of this predicament they were in, they realized education as one key pillar of that.
Yes.
Right? And this is what it's about. And what they said then is that look. They malnutrition, right? In the case of malnutrition, they put in a special program and giving milk daily, fresh milk daily. So there is a nutritional angle and side to school and to education, right? So we will not be the only country to say to incorporate feeding programs to encourage the kids to come to school, right? Because many of them stay out of school or roam the streets now because they're looking for something to eat. That meal they get from school may be the only meal of the day, and the reason why they come in, and hopefully they will learn a thing or two. So from that angle, it's not unique and it's strange. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
From there, and he talks about and lending other types of support to the cocoa industry will really help revive it from the doldrums. And the doldrums it is in, right? From being a top cocoa producer to where we are now. One thing that I think really needs to happen though is there's no mention, and this is from the association. We have an association for everything.
Yeah.
The Cocoa Farmers Association. There's not enough emphasis on processing, because that's another thing. We create beans, these things go to wherever and come back to us as refined produce. I mean, even as near as Ghana, have better cocoa refining and production processing processing than we do. So all of that is important.
All right, thank you very much, Tunde. Wadi, I'll come to you for the next story. Oyoita, poor working environment killing employees' morale. Kindly quickly take us through this story.
The head of service says non-conducive working environment, inadequate office equipment, and low power supply were affecting workers' morale. That's to add to the fact that the minimum wages are not coming as at when due. However, one of the things would work. But one other thing that we have to remember is even the government agencies and parastatals owe so much monies to the power companies that they practically don't get power supply. So at the end of the day, offices are not properly maintained because we have a poor maintenance culture in Nigeria and so on and so forth. But that's, for me, the long term. You need to create better maintenance situations as we go on.
And Benga Kamu here reacts to the suggestion for banks to give credit. It says, are the conditions in the country conducive for the repayment of these loans? And Obi Tenkenobi says, who will bail the cats, capturing the biodata of the herdsmen? Civilians can't do it. Armed forces cannot. God is not exactly snapping any fingers. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for stepping into the studio to analyze the stories with us. Talking about Wadi at Ring, Nigeria, Tunde Okufi at Big Coats, and Mr. C, Mr. MISTRCEEE on Twitter. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Such a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Next, we talk sports. Let's have a conversation around Roger Federer's performance last night, and then Nigeria's performance that was lackluster. Stay with us for the locker room at 8:15.
Thank you.
That